Let's take a look around the crash of Air Florida Flight 90. That happened in January of 1982. There was a 737 which departed from the end of this runway that you see behind me. And it managed to get airborne for a brief time before it crashed just down the way. It made it over this little point of land and then crashed just over there. And the flight crew did a number of things that day that contributed to crashing that aircraft, that 737. For one thing, they used the engine reversers to try to back away from the gate. That was absolutely not allowed. It tends to suck a lot of debris into the engines. So as I was saying, that airplane right there, they didn't fly that well. They were really struggling after lifting off from that runway to gain any altitude at all. And that was because they made a number of very bad moves. I mentioned they used the thrust reversers to try to back away from the gate. Not allowed. They also knew that they had snow built up on the aircraft, including on the wings, commented on that, they were aware of that. What else did they do? Well, for one thing, they decided that they would follow close to a DC-9 in front of them with the idea that maybe some of the exhaust from that airplane would melt the snow off of their 737. And of course, if you've ever spent time in a cold environment, you know that as soon as you try to melt snow, it's really cold. We got Superman here. And you try to melt snow and it's really cold out, it's just going to cause it to really freeze as a nice layer of ice. So they really blew it on that one. They also failed to activate the engine de-icing system. Kind of an amazing mistake on that one. They really didn't fly much in cold weather. And they did have also a chance to abort that takeoff, because especially the first officer started to notice as they were rolling down the runway, started to notice that the engine performance didn't seem right. He was commenting on it. It doesn't look right, doesn't seem right. And turns out it wasn't right, and they had every opportunity to abort that takeoff, hit the brakes, save not only their own lives, but lives of all the other people on board who didn't have a chance to contribute to all of the poor decisions that this flight crew made on that day. And most of the passengers did die when that airplane crashed. So I mentioned it barely got airborne from the end of that runway, flew over this little point of land, gravelly point, and then started coming down right on the other end here of this little piece of land. We'll walk down there, get a look at the actual crash site of Air Florida Flight 90. At the other end here of Gravelly Point, this is where the plane came down. There's a series of bridges. There's a railroad bridge, two railroad bridges it looks like behind me, and then we've got two in front of me. And the plane was struggling to the point where it was now starting to drop down. The captain was telling the first officer who was at the controls, he was saying, barely climb, just barely climb, forward, forward. He was telling him, we got to put the nose down, we got to just try to clear these bridges, somehow stay in the air. And the first officer just was not able to keep that airplane flying. It was dropping. He said, we're going down, Larry. And they cleared these first two bridges that you see behind me. And then this bridge above us right now, the airplane actually impacted the deck of this bridge. And there was a traffic jam up there, so a number of people actually died when the landing gear squashed their cars and such. And then the aircraft, basically after sort of clipping this bridge that you see back here, went nose down right into the Potomac River behind these bushes and shrubs here. And this was again a very cold, snowy January day in 1982, and right about where you see that goose sitting out there, and off to the left of that, pretty close to the shore, between these two bridges that you see, that is where Flight 90 ended up in a very icy Potomac River, plunging through the ice. You can see the Jefferson Memorial is just off at the end of that left bridge there. And so this is the location where a lot of people lost their lives that day in 1982 in these very icy waters. You might still see somewhere, right, the footage of a helicopter hovering over this area here, trying to rescue any of the surviving passengers who were struggling out in that icy water. And this goose is telling his part of the story. You're right, you are right. And this is where all that was happening. This is where you saw a guy diving into that icy water as a woman was about to go under. Her head was about to go under, and he dives in there and starts dragging her back to this very shore right here. So the goose has told his part of the story, and I think I've told mine. Very sad story, something that could have, certainly should have, never happened in the first place.